Okay, a couple procedural notes that Dave just reminded me of. The first is the start time for class. So the published start time is 5:30. Would anybody object if we started at 6 instead? I don't know if any of you are like coming from either the east side or the west side. In a couple of minutes, but 6 o'clock I think works better for me. It might work better for your stomachs too. So if you want to have some dinner beforehand, would that be okay? We won't be going really much of any later. I mean, tonight's a long lecture, just sort of like getting everything started and stuff like that. I think if you go and look at previous previous years, everybody's out of here in like under 2.5 hours, if that. So is it okay to start at 6 here on out? And seriously, does anybody? Yeah.
We're like leave a half hour early instead.
Sorry, what?
We're leaving a half hour earlier instead, starting a half hour late.
Well, for me and perhaps for some of you, it's easier to start a half hour. It's not so much about the duration for me as it is, just yeah, just 6 o'clock. I found has worked better. And Dave reminded me of this because the project assignments are due at 6 p.m., meaning that I want you, instead, I'm encouraging you to come here to participate in the class as opposed to like staying at the lab for an extra hour to get your projects done. Okay, so next week, 6 p.m. If you arrive here at 5:30, no one's here. Oh yeah, right, because we're starting at 6. Okay, thanks. And then the other thing that Dave reminded me of, as something I guess I haven't shown off yet, is the YouTube page. Sorry, there's another freaky picture of me. Okay, I don't know how much of you guys use YouTube, but there are 2 playlists. Actually, there are soon to be 3. This is the lectures from last year, but the advanced Java programming. These are these are the screencasts. These are the lectures. The other thing was a recording of classes, and we'll have a new one for 2014. I'll make it a little bigger so everybody can see. Oh, that was cool. So most of these are linked from the home page. But I wanted to point out the Getting Started with Java, which talks about using IntelliJ, which talks about sort of installing things, where to go download the Java if you don't have it already, the Java. And then I also have a screencast that I did talking more about Git and GitHub. I think it's a little bit more targeted than like what I've been talking about tonight. But it's sort of covering all the same things. But if you're interested in Git and GitHub, and I do highly recommend it, this will be a little bit more streamlined than sort of watching me do 3 things all at the same time. Like, oh, I'm doing this code and I'm checking stuff in and I'm off on this website. So anyway, maybe I should have the camera on. You can watch me do my little dance and put some techno music behind it or something. Anyway, this is a playlist. And so, like you can start with the video.
Welcome to it.
And it'll play, and you can like navigate over here. You can just sit there and binge watch Java videos, and just go through them all. So anyway, let me know how this works for you. Everybody has different learning styles. Some people might prefer to like have me up here and do my little song and dance for 2 hours. Let me know. It worked okay last term, but this is only the second time I've tried the experiment. And so, 1 point does not make a trend. So, let me know how this is working for you as a learning mechanism. Okay. Anything else? Those are the 2 things that you pointed out. So awesome having it today. You like telling me these things. I'm like, anyway.
I found it helpful to like always watch the videos before the lecture, just because it seems like we cover a lot of the stuff. That was helpful last year.
Cool. Good.
I tried running that the line of code on the CS servers to like be able to submit the grades, and it didn't seem to work. I don't know.
What error did it get?
I have to run it again.
Okay.
I'll run it again later.
Yeah, or post it to the Google Plus group. It's probably because you're not using a version of Java. Actually, can you type java-version? And what does it tell you?
1.6.
Yep, that would do it. So it's like what? Add package. If you do, if you do add pkg, you get this totally awesome like interface, and I go down arrow and stuff like that. Hey, don't laugh, it works. Where you can like Java 8, is what I've been using. JGrasp. Right, yeah, and then you like hit return or something. And that will configure your environment most likely, or at least will tell you where it is. Oh, I'm sorry, want me to do that again for you guys who are watching? Yep, add package. Okay.
When should we expect the lectures to be posted on YouTube?
Well, tonight, you know, I'm a little jazzed, I'm a little buzzed, and so I'll only a little. Come on, I say jazzed. So it'll probably be within a day or two, and I'll post to. I'll share it with the community, so you'll know. Yeah, it usually. These are like there's like I don't edit. It's like it's pretty raw, and so then some of the lectures are edited down, so you get like nice zooms in and stuff like that. I don't put that much effort into the lectures, into the class. I need to distinguish between the two because it's all lecture in my head. It's all of me up here pontificating. Okay. So, what have we covered so far? We have covered the syllabus. We've looked at GitHub and Maven and the koans. Let's talk about those koans. Let's talk about the first programming assignment, which is Project 1. Okay. So, this term we'll be developing an airline application. You'll be modeling an airline, and an airline has flights that go from a source to a destination and have a departure time and arriving time. What we do in this first project is you write sort of the fundamental classes, your airline class and your flight class that you'll work with for the rest of the course. The project is worth 7 points. One of those is something called the plan of attack, which we'll talk about next week. It's basically a description of what you're doing. And it is due on July 9th, so that's 2 weeks from tonight. Is that right? Yeah, 2 weeks from tonight. The goal of this first project is to take some classes that I wrote and extend them. So it's sort of like lesson object-oriented programming, right? I've provided the superclasses, and you are going to extend that superclass and add some behavior to it. So specifically, I have a package, edu-pdx-cs410j, that's my code, which lives in a jar that I write up on my Maven repository. It has 2 classes, abstract airline and abstract flight. And what I want you to do is to write 2 concrete classes in your package. Airline, which extends abstract airline, and flight, which extends abstract flight. And your code's got to compile, so it must implement all of the abstract methods of its superclass. What's an abstract method?
A method that it's sort of promised that it will be defined later in an extended class.
Yeah, like a promise. It's basically a specification, a signature. It's got a name. It's got some parameters that have types and it returns something. And it's basically an object saying, "Hey, I provide this functionality. I don't know how to implement it though. It's up to one of my subclasses to determine what the specific implementation that it should provide." So that's an abstract method. So your airline has a name. So like Dave's Airlines, and it consists of multiple flights. A flight is an object that departs from a source and leaves at a given time and arrives at some destination at a given arrival time. For this first assignment, everything's a string. So even you're representing a date using the string type. For this first assignment, it's okay. You can learn about the date class later. And so you can ignore the get departure and get arrival methods. They both return null, and you don't need to do them for this first assignment. And a flight also has an identifying number. So that's sort of the data that you'll be modeling. And then the third class that is part of this project is something called Project 1. That contains the main method. So like the main method in Java is when you're running from the command line, that's where the program starts executing. It's like your main method in C or C++. And the main method has one argument, which is an array of strings. That's the command line arguments that you pass in on the command line. And so Project 1 expects command line arguments has its command line has some optional arguments and some required arguments. The required arguments are in this order: first, the name of the airline, then the number of the flight, the 3-letter code of the departure airport, the time that the flight leaves, and the format of the time is month, day, year, hour, minute. This is 24-hour time, so it's not an AM and PM. It's 24-hour time. And then the 3-letter code of the destination airport, the arrival airport, and then the time at which it arrives. So these guys are required. And there are 2 options, and that may appear in any order. All the options appear before the arguments. Dash print will print a description of the new flight by invoking its toString. And then there's dash readme, which we'll talk more about next week. Prints a readme for the project and simply exits. So that's what the command line looks like. A couple notes here. If you have like multiple word arguments, like the date and time is 2 arguments. If you have a multi-word argument, something like the name of it, put that in double quotes. So this is just here again, I'll be testing on Unix. He'll be testing on Unix. So if you have put that in double quotes to have multiple words, I'll be 1 command line argument. Dates and times, however, are 2 separate command line arguments. Do not quote them. And so here are a couple of examples of valid times. So you can have like a 1-digit month or a 2-digit month and a 1-digit date. Lots of footnotes that you can all read. We'll also learn next time about the submit program, which is a Java program that you run to submit your code. I don't want to take the time tonight to do it. You can either read it ahead on the website, or we can talk more about it next week. Okay, error handling. As you can see, this program doesn't do all that much. Parses the command line, puts together a couple of objects, and prints something out, which is exactly on purpose. It's just. I think I do. Do I? I don't. So it should look. Oh, well, it should invoke the flight's toString method, and so I think that'll sort of give you an idea of what the output should look like. That question, yes.
Those arguments, does it have to come in that order?
The arguments, yes. The arguments come in that order. You can either have print. They're optional. They can go in any order. Yep. And if you if you don't have the print, if you have neither print nor readme, there's really no output. Kind of a dumb case, but just parses the command line. If it's valid, just does nothing. This is the first assignment. It's dumb like that, right? We're baby steps. And so, right, the purpose of this is to figure out, how to work with the classes that I provide, and also do some command line parsing. And hey, that means it'll be easy, right? So you can watch more Java videos or something like that. Okay, cat videos, whatever you're into. So error handling, which actually is kind of a big component of this. So all you're doing is parsing the command line. Your program should exit gracefully with a nice error message, sort of like so that the grader can understand what it is that went wrong. With condition, under conditions like you're missing some of the command line, or maybe you've got too many command line arguments. The format of the day or time is wrong, or the flight is non-numeric, et cetera, et cetera. Here again, this is a pretty easy first assignment, and the focus kind of is input validation of the command line. The class files can be found in this jar file, although if you're using Maven, you don't need to worry about such details. And here again, we'll learn about the submit program next week, but I'd like you to submit all 3 files as part of that. So, to get you started, I created a Maven archetype for this project, which will go and create a Maven project that you can then compile and build. It's got some unit tests. Yes, it's got some unit tests some tests. One can argue whether they're unit tests. We'll see an example in a moment for working with the files. And so there are Maven commands like Maven package that'll go and compile your source code, run your unit tests, and build the jar file. There's also a Maven site that you can run to generate some neat reports about your program, like the Java docs and stuff like that. And then when you want to run your program, you can run it with this command line right here, java-jar, and then give it the jar file, and then provide it the command line arguments. So this is your first assignment. Right after I'll answer any questions that you have about it, and then we'll look at the that project 0 for an example that looks a lot like this to get you familiar with using Maven and stuff like that. So any questions about this? It's due in 2 weeks. Okay, cool. The last thing I want to cover is getting started with this student program. Okay. So way back in the day, a long time ago, there was this first project, which was all about taking one of the classes that I use in the object-oriented programming lecture called Human and extending it. It basically ended up being redundant with the first program, and the feedback I got from students is like, listen, we don't need both the student, this project and project 1. So this became project 0. And now I use it as an example to show you guys, so to get you familiar with the environment that you'll be doing for your projects. So this is also in your handouts. Okay, I'll talk through it here, and I'd like you to also read along because we'll work on this together. Okay, so. Here we'll be creating a student class that subclasses the human class, well, that we didn't really discuss in lecture. That is discussed in the object-oriented programming slides. So the whole idea is very much like your first assignment, work with someone else's class, learn about inheritance and virtual methods, and then read program arguments from the command line. So here I have like some example code, which actually you don't need to type in yourself. You can just get it from the Maven archetype that I created. The student is in the student class is in your package. It extends human, so human is my class in my Lang example package. And here's what the student constructor looks like. It's got 4 arguments: the name, the classes, the GPA, and the gender. By the way, this comment right here is one of those Java doc comments. Right, so this is a comment. It's got, and you can tell it's Java doc because it's got the / special notation. And there's a tool called Java doc that will go and parse the source code and from it extract these comments and format it nicely into HTML pages, create PDFs, blah blah blah, wherever you want. We'll see examples of that shortly. So it's got a constructor. You guys know what a constructor is, right? What is a constructor? Initializes an object, right? You go and create it, and it's like, okay, here's the information you need to initialize yourself. Go create a new student. Okay, that's a student. It has a says method that needs to be implemented. All students say this class is too much work. It's got a toString. So toString is a method that's inherited from Java Lang object that just basically takes an object and returns a string representation of it. And it's got a main method. So let's see here. I think there's an example of what the main method does down here. And it takes in the command line arguments, creates a string, and then prints it out by invoking toString. So we create it with an archetype, and once we do that, we'll do some Maven commands to work with it. So I'm going to start this tonight to basically get it off the ground, and then I'll finish developing it, or we'll finish developing it next week. And we'll do some test-driven development there. So we'll start by creating a new project following the archetype. Okay. So here again in my source code directory, I have the same problem with that tilde. Really got to get that fixed. Let's Control-C it now. There we go. Okay. Bad tilde, good tilde. Okay. So it goes off, it downloads some stuff from my Maven repository. The group ID is going to be edu pdx cs410j whitlock. Artifact ID is going to be student. The version, sure. Keep the snapshot. Package, same as group ID. I'm totally happy with that. Yes, that's what I want. Okay, goes off. Creates a directory called student. It's got all sorts of good stuff. Let's add this directory to GitHub. Oops. Git add student. Git status. Oh, this is interesting. Right. Okay. Sorry. So it's telling. What is it telling me? Oh, look, you've added this pom.xml and the student.java and the student test. And oh, by the way, there are some files that GitHub saw, but they're not in GitHub. Should they be in GitHub? And the answer is no. These are the IML, the IPR, and the IWS are the IntelliJ files. I want to tell Git, don't put those under version control. Ignore those. So I'm going to open up my gitignore file, and I'm going to add them here at the end. Let's see here, star IPR, star IML, and star. I know I did have them in paste, but it's going to be super huge and ugly. Oh, there we go. IWS. Oops. IWS. Look, Mom, I'm using VI. Okay. Cool. And now when I do status, it doesn't show up anymore because they're ignored. I'm going to commit that one separately. I'm going to say ignore IntelliJ files.
Do you want to add your gitignore?
I'm going to do it separately. Yeah. Good call. So I'm going to do this in one commit. I'm just going to commit that change. Still got these guys in the other change set. And now I'm going to say git commit added student project files from Maven archetype. That's student. So I commit all of that. Okay, cool. So now everything's nice and clean and shiny. Good deal. I can push those up to GitHub, I suppose. They're all up there. Okay, now I want to go back to IntelliJ. I'm going to close out this project for the cones. I'm going to import a new project. It's going to be my student project now. This needs to be refreshed. Oh, duh. It's this guy. So student. I'm going to import this guy. Yes, I'm a Maven project. Yes, sure, whatever. Yes, Java 8. Student doesn't find GitHub, which is interesting. VCS, enable version control integration. Git. Okay, so it knows about stuff now. Okay, so go back to my project assignment. So I've run the Maven archetype. So I've got a bunch of code. And I'm going to build that code, say a Maven package. So what Maven package does is that it takes the source code and compiles it. It runs the unit test against that source code. What compiles all the code. If the code compiles, then it runs the unit test. All the unit tests pass, then it builds the jar file. And jar file is the artifact that you can run. Okay. So it packages everything up, and package then implies that you build the source code, you run the unit tests, you assemble the jar. So let's do Maven package. Maven package. Oops, let's go to the right directory and do Maven package. Okay, Maven compiler plugin, blah blah blah, compilation error. Okay, so what do we got here? It doesn't like, so in student.java, line 25, column 77, a constructor human in class human cannot be applied to the given types. No arguments. Let's take a look at that. So we want to find our student class. So we'll go to navigate to class, or command N. We'll say student. Oh, and sure enough, here's the student class. So this was generated by the archetype. I've got this the student class here, and in big red underline, it's saying that there's some problem here, which is there's no default constructor available in human. So in Java, when you have a constructor always needs to call call a constructor of its superclass, and by default, the compiler, if it doesn't see an explicit call to the superclass, it'll try to call the zero argument constructor, which is nice if you extend object because object has a zero argument constructor, so that sort of makes sense. What this is telling me is that human doesn't have a zero argument constructor. Let's go figure out what human does have. And because I've got my project configured correctly, or I hope, if I drill down into what human is by doing Control B or not Control Command B or Command click, oh, it looks like it's yeah. Here's the source code. Oh, it's compiled code, so it doesn't have the source code. That's a bummer. But it is telling me that human has a constructor that takes a string called name. So this is the constructor that we need to call. Okay. So the way you invoke a constructor is by saying super, and we'll pass the name. Okay. So I'm looking at IntelliJ, and oh, it's still underlined in red. Oops, the name of the class is still underlined in red. And I look over here, and this is still red here. It says 2 errors, 3 warnings found. And guess what? It highlights things in red that aren't compiling right here. Okay. So it's saying that there's missing a return statement. That's right. I already have a method that says it returns a string, and there's no return statement. So what should I add here? Sorry, what? Yep, return null. It would certainly make it compile. Okay. And then I've got another one down here. By the way, I can navigate to these guys by saying navigate to next error, next highlighted error, or F2. That'll take me down there. Same thing, okay. Return null again. I like that. Okay. So it's got some warnings. Do I care about them? What is it complaining about? Oh yeah, so these things are grayed out. It's saying that classes and GPA and gender is never used. That's absolutely correct, but I'm going to use them later. I'm not going to worry about that so much. Okay, so I've got rid of all the red. There's some warnings. Okay, so now I'll go back and I'll try running things again. Okay, Maven package. So let's see here, compiling that. Oh, okay, well let's see. Something blew up, but it looks like it got a little further. Was that a bell? Looks like it got past the compiler. That's awesome. Compile the test classes. Now I want to run the tests, and it's saying that there were 2 tests run and 2 tests failed, and there's something called invoking main with no arguments has exit code of 1. I'm looking at a stack trace here. Are you guys familiar with exceptions in Java? Right, so when something goes wrong in Java, like you try to access a null pointer or, well, just something goes wrong, you get this error object that's called an exception that describes the error, and then also from the exception you can get the call stack. So it's like, what method called which method that resulted in this error? Really helps you debug things, especially since it tells you like what line of source code it's at. Wow, look at this big ugly stack trace. Here's what I'm going to do. There's this really cool feature of IntelliJ. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to, actually I'll, just so everybody can see, I'm going to copy this. And then off in IntelliJ, there's under Analyze Stack Trace, I can, notice that it was on the clipboard, and so it's already pasted in here, otherwise you can paste it in here. I'm going to click OK, and then what it does is it analyzes it. There was a bunch of like internal calls that it doesn't know anything about, but now I can just click on student test.22 and it brings me right there. Yeah, super useful when you've got like some big ugly stack trace on the command line or in a log file, and you want to be able to navigate it in your UI. Oh my goodness! Okay, what are we looking at here? Now we are in the. I sound just like Uncle Bob. Heavens to Betsy! No, I don't even know what Betsy. We're in the test code. Okay, now for the student class, and I believe also your project 1, it comes with an automated test that uses this little framework that I wrote that basically allows you to invoke a main method and get information like what was written to standard out, what was written to standard error, what was the exit code that was issued by the program, and you can then use this to test your command lines. Strictly speaking, this isn't a unit test because unit tests are usually concerned more about like the methods Like I've got some method and how it's implemented. But I think this is a good way to approach the project because you're really thinking about your command line, like what's a valid argument and things like that. So what I want to do before we adjourn for the evening is get these 2 test cases to pass. So let's figure it out. So what are we saying? This says, okay, when we invoke the main method of the student class, so if we go back to our student class, it's got a main method, which right now is empty. It's saying that the exit code of the VM, or the exit code of the main method, should equal to 1. And well, I saw the output of running this test over here, but I want to run it from IntelliJ instead. So I can go under Run, and I can say, or maybe I can't go under, where is it? I can right-click, and I'll say, okay, run invoke main with no, so run that one test right there, this method right here. And here I get my error message. Okay, I expected 1, but was null. Okay, here at line 22. So I'm now in Uncle Bob mode where I've got a failing unit test and I need to make it pass. Okay, so how do we make it pass? I need to have the exit code of my student class be null. But you know what? I got things to compile, and I'm proud of myself. I want to check in that code. Got the code to compile. I'm just going to quick commit it. Yeah, I know you got some warnings. Okay, cool. Because that was like one state of mild goodness. Now let's see if we can get it to a state of mild betterness. Okay, so I want my main method to have a return code of 1. Are you guys familiar with the system class in Java? Right, like system.out, system.in, all that good stuff. System.exit. What does system.exit do? It exits the program with a return code, right? And so, like in Unix, when you exit from a C program or whatever, and then you can do the echo, dollar question mark. You can say, oh, the exit code was 73 or something like that. You get the same thing here. It turns out, like my little testing framework that I wrote, it runs the main method in such a way that the VM doesn't really exit, but it captures the exit code. So we want to get this test passing, to do the minimal amount of work. We say, okay. When the main method runs, if it just exits, if it just has an exit code of 1, I think it should work. So we'll go back here, and we'll go to the run, and we'll say rerun this test. Yay! Test is passing. We've got another test here. Normally I would check in, but let's see if we can get this other one working too. So we'll go back and run all of our tests. And so I need to click, how do I click on student test? There we go, run all of student test. It's got 2 test methods that are annotated with this @test. And it's saying, okay, there's one that's failing. It's this, oops. It's this guy right here. It's saying that, okay, when I invoke my main method with no arguments, it should print missing arguments to standard error. Missing arguments is like, should be double quotes, I guess. And so what it's saying is that, hey, listen, when I get standard error from running my program, it should contain the string missing command line arguments, but instead, it gets nothing. It gets an empty string. Okay, so how do we get my main program to print a standard error? Yep. System.error .println missing command line arguments. Oops. Okay, now I'll run my tests again. Aha! Everything's passing. So, I've got 2 tests. Oops. I've got 2 tests. They're not passing. I should commit my changes. Commit them. Got the 2 tests that came with the archetype to pass. Commit, push off to GitHub. Okay, so I've got 2 tests. They're passing. Am I done? Done for now, but there's still a lot more assignment. There's a lot more stuff to do here, right? So ultimately what we want is when we run the program with command line arguments like this. Oh, I guess I should go back to Maven and run my package again. So it goes and it ran the tests, and look, no failures. Probably, here, wait a second. Look, no failures. 2 tests ran, none failed, none errored, none were skipped. This is good. It created that jar file. That's awesome. It's got all sorts of good stuff. And now when I go and run that jar file, it runs my main program. It says missing command line arguments. Ultimately, what I'm aiming for, though, is when I run my program with all of these arguments, it prints out Dave has a GPA of 3.64, taking 3 classes, blah, 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 blah. He says this class is too much work. That's what we need to get to. But right now, we've got missing command line arguments. So what we'll see next week is building up that program using test-driven development. So we're going towards that goal, but we're going to see lots of little steps along the way to get us there. So that's all I got for tonight. Any questions based on what we learned today? Any comments or feedback that you have? Yes?
I was gonna say, before even coming today, I was really impressed about how much stuff you have on there and how much stuff you have already prepared so we can get ahead. That's really cool.
Thanks. I appreciate that. You know, I think a lot about teaching. I think sort of like how I learned things and all the tools that are available today that weren't there many years ago when I learned it. And I want to make sure that, you know, I can give you guys the experience, you know, that you need. So anyway, I hear the rustling of backpacks. That means it's time to go. Have a great week, everybody. Just a couple of reminders. Please join the Google Plus community. That's how you learn more about the class. Fill out that survey program and let me know how it goes this week. Thank you very much.